We Santo Man Kolnyang Mike Chol Grangawan Yupit Luping Yarul Pandil Chet Maniel Anaketon Niel Zillo Wenetona Dol I think a kick Kega Buka Gade Anyalinya dia Kuika Pingrin Jemana Liet When I Changarong Ajedu Kega Parandi Madina Maja Kubo Makur Kega Boliken Kuai Tatian Wagaridin Kegela Emmanuel when you go to York I think a kick Kega Buka Gade Anyalinya dia Kuika Pingrin Jemana Liet When I Changarong Ajedu Kega Parandi Madina Maja Kubo Makur Kega Boliken Kuai Tatian Wagaridin Kegela Emmanuel when you go to I think a kick Kega Buka Gade Anyalinya dia Kuika Pingrin Jemana Liet.
Thank you so much to our viewers, wherever you are tuning in. Welcome to Lagos State Media Beyond Boundaries. And in the studio with us is our usual guest, Mr. Edmund Yakani. And as the topic is there running below the screen, today we promise our viewers during our last show to analyze and discuss the presidential Republican degree, which was made on 3rd of March 2023. And we promise you that we will also discuss yesterday, which is Thursday, once the President, His Excellency Salva Kiir meets with the first Vice President, Dr. Riek Machar. Unfortunately, the meeting was adjourned yesterday to today. And most of you might be aware the meeting took place today, a few hours ago. And that's why we did not come live yesterday. And we tried to bring Edmund Yakani today so that he can also brief us on what is the outcome of the President, His Excellency Salva Kiir and First Vice President Dr. Riek Machar meetings today over the recent political disputes on Republicans' order, specifically on the Ministry of Defense and Veteran Affairs, and on the same degree, President swiped to the Ministry of Interior with the said ministry. Mr. Edmund Yakani will surely brief us on what is the latest updates currently on the political arena in our country. And then our conversation will basically focus on what is the outcome and how should this meeting actually give hope to the citizens and to the peace granters of revitalized peace agreement. Mr. Edmund Yakani, before I give you a few minutes to give us your opening remark, I would urge our viewers, whoever is watching us now, to share this live show on your Facebook wall, at least for other colleagues or South Sudanese to listen to the latest updates in regard to the most anticipated meeting between the President and his first Vice President. Edmund Yakani, the floor is yours, my brother.
Thank you very much for hosting me as usual. I'd like to say hi to all listeners and viewers of Lex Media, and I'd like to say hi to Lex Media. And as you say, we have been closely monitoring the whole of this week, the latest political development, which is associated with the presidential decree issued by His Excellency President in line of the implementation of the revitalized peace agreement in terms of the decree for relieving 2 ministers and the swapping of the ministries. So I've been following, as you said, the meeting was postponed on Thursday and they met today. And so I can share with your viewers and the audience today to make sure that at least we build consensus and we follow what's happening back home and how the political atmosphere look like. And also how do we counter the misinformation and disinformation the hostile propaganda going on now in social media and some of the hate speeches that we have already seen in social media through our tracking system. So I'd like to say thank you for availing me the opportunity always to share with South Sudanese. And we build the nation we want through dialogue, not through violence. So thank you very much. Over there to you.
Thank you so much, Edmund, for your opening remark. And through that, we will go straight to the questions. Kindly, can you brief us what is the outcome of the meeting? Remember, Edmund, this meeting has been mostly anticipated by South Sudanese, both back home and in diaspora, to see how the two leaders will come to under one umbrella to agree on the bone of contentions of these two ministries and how they will present what they will agree upon to the citizens and to the international community. Thank you, Edmund Yakani.
Thank you very much. Let me start first by reflecting the atmosphere of the meeting. If you remember, one of the biggest fear people have whether this meeting will be different from the meetings that we have seen in the past, and specifically reference to J1 in 2016 in July. So I think this meeting was a bit in an environment where you don't see tensions merging among the parties, and you see a spirit of sort of like really friendly atmosphere, as Benjamin Marial say in his speech. So that's the first thing, is that the atmosphere of the meeting is a bit friendly and it's a bit convincing that there's a sense of they discussing and finding amicable solution to the crisis. But in terms of the content and the substance of the meeting, there was no really tangible outcome. Why? Because the situation where this decree was issued in a confusing manner that does not match with the provisions of the revitalized agreement, does not match with the spirit of the agreement, as I explained last time, in terms of the two approaches that are offered by the agreement in making such decisions. So there's a clear challenge that the decree caught up the principles by surprise, in sense that the interpretation of the agreement is under challenge and the spirit of the agreement is under challenge. That's one thing, but also something that tells you why the substance and the content of the meeting couldn't really yield good results, tangible results. They are what you call profiteers of confusion around how the presidency operates. That means His Excellency the President, First Vice President. So it means some people came and messed up with the approach, and this approach was an approach of total mess for the principals, and the principals are forced to swallow that bitter pill of the mess of some people around the president. So there's a likelihood that some people have to pay a price for this mess. So if you see the way how it looks like, but at least after the meeting, if you look at the statement that issued by the SPLM-IO in their Facebook page, they use the praise that the meeting have gone well today and it have end up with good results. That's the praise IO use, good results. That the outcome of the meeting is good results. What described that good results? There's no details. So that's the end of the IO position, is that it's good. And that's why the reason tells you the good results. That's why you don't see an official statement coming from them describing the good results. But as you see the images, a bit there's a smiling faces, but those are political smiling faces, which is attached with a lot of confusion around that environment. That's one thing that I'd like to bring forward. If you look at the side of the SPLM in the government, or the IG, specifically per the statement issued by Honorable Minister Benjamin Marial, the Office of the President, he used words which expressed as a reconciliation, friendly atmosphere. They are trying to find an amicable solution. But at least in Benjamin's statement, which if you compare to the IU statement, is that Benjamin have indicated an indicator that there was no proper tangible results by saying the two principals have agreed to have further discussion, further consultation in later day. That later day, whether it's next week, it's next month, it is after the end of the transitional period, is at least there's a later day. Benjamin have expressed that as an outcome of the meeting in terms of the proceedings. So it tells you very clear that they have not reached tangible results from the meeting, but at least they have acknowledged that there's a mistake that needs to be addressed. And nobody addressed the mistake. It is day to address the mistake. So what is, in summary, what's the outcome of the meeting? That at least they have reached consensus that there's a problem and they require to resolve the problem. That is the outcome. And I think that in terms of instability. It have helped in cutting down instability, and that also it have helped in reducing misinformation, disinformation, hostile propaganda. At least their meeting have cut down the situation that they are approaching. And of course, it's not new in the history of the two parties and the two principals in implementing the revitalized agreement. They have similar disputes, and they have not started in one day. It have taken them some few days. So at least their meeting face to face have contributed in cutting down misinformation, disinformation, and also it cut down the fear that maybe tension may emerge and the likelihood of return to violence may be high. So that is the benefit of the meeting, that we have tangible. But in terms of a tangible solution to the problem, to the crisis that are associated with the presidential decree in relieving the Minister of Defense, Minister of Interior, and swapping the ministries, there's no concrete solution. But at least they have reached consensus that they need to resolve it, which is a good indicator that we should appreciate it. We shouldn't really leave it like that. At least there's a sense of acknowledging problem and the sense that we must find a solution to the problem. But the language used is that in later day. And of course, we don't want to see this later day as another day of dragging feet in implementing the pending task of the agreement within the period of 24 months. And specifically, if you look at the language today in the streets, is that citizens are demanding elections without any compromise. But if elections is by December 2024, by this time at least the parties could have engaged, or the government could have engaged on key milestones that create an environment to the elections. So the meeting have, in summary, the meeting have not come out with any tangible decision or with any tangible results, except that they have acknowledged there's a problem and we must continue finding a solution for this problem through a dialogue. And I think also that has sent a message to people in uniform now. There's nobody who should cock a gun and want to respond because there's a misunderstanding between the two principles, which is a good benefit for us. And of course, as I said, why this problem is hard to resolve, it is a mistake that the principles are taken by surprise. This per my analysis. And this means, and this confirms what I usually used to say, that there's a people around the principles who are more powerful than the principle in implementing the revitalized agreement, and they end up as the spoilers. So I think the principles now need to check twice of those decisions. Yes, there must be an appetite of such decision. Of course, in Africans say, there's no smoke without a what? A fire. So that decree, if we call it as a smoke, there must be a fire somewhere. So per the assessments that we have moved on the ground, we have such on the ground, that already initially, prior to the visit of the Pope, there's official communication from the president to the first vice president on that particular subject matter. But they have not reached consensus on the methodology on how to handle it. And seems they plan to meet and to come with amicable approach that does not send a signal like it's a violation. But unfortunately, it seems some few whistleblowers around have whistled the blow to make the marathon to kick off, and now the marathon have kicked off in a very disturbing way. But obviously, we wish our leaders to take primary responsibility. Whether it's a mistake or it's a right way, it's at the end of the day, if we are to seek for solution, the primary responsibility lies with them, not with anybody, neither with AGA, neither with anybody. It's the two principles to reach consensus. So as I said, there's nothing that we have it as an outcome of the meeting. So somehow the meeting ending up in a flat way with an agreement that we need to continue meeting and find a solution to the problem and acknowledge the problem. That's all that I can say as outcome of the meeting of today. And of course, from there, they went to Council of Ministers. Yeah. Council of Ministers meeting, they agreed that they'll continue this particular issue of swapping ministries and relieving the two ministers, which is not in line with the spirit and the text of the agreement.
Thank you so much, Edmund Yakani, for that update and actually dissecting the outcome of the meetings on both sides and how the IO respond positively, praising the meeting, that the meeting went on successfully, although there were no tangible results. And on the same side of the government, we have had the Minister of Presidential Affairs, Dr. Benjamin Marial, speaking and using words which you actually rightfully repeated on how he was actually addressing the issues and trying to explain to the citizens and to the nation how the meeting went on. When you look at the whole scenario, Mr. Edmund Yakani, in a layman language, can you rightfully tell our viewers that the two leaders did not agree on anything except identifying that there is a mistake, and they have given them time to seek for solutions or amicable solution to that problems, and they did not even disclose the date on when are they actually going to meet to agree on those. And if that is the case, many citizens are worried. In this later day, which was said by Dr. Benjamin, will that time come without more degrees being issued in between here? And this is the worry of many citizens. The two ministers will remain at vacant as long as they will agree upon, but people are assuming that maybe possibly there could be another degree following, considering the recent degree in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Edmund.
Obviously, thank you very much. That word later day is a political statement, and maybe a statement that attract a quick decrease to be issued in a holistic manner. So that later day may refer to a total reshuffle of the government, since the principals have not reached a consensus on the decrease of relieving the Ministry of Interior and Defense and swapping them the two ministries. And remember, Foreign Affairs is hanging without a minister. And remember, Foreign Affairs have a deputy minister, but we need to have a minister of Foreign Affairs for Foreign Service, because there's a lot of foreign issues and concerns that we need a minister to be there, but it's hanging now. So it means that tells you very clear that this later day is nothing except this later day is a comprehensive reshuffle of the government. That's I think, and that's why we hope in this weekend we must visit some politicians' houses to eat the bulls and then the sheep they will slaughter on lobby. I'm quite sure this weekend will be a weekend of lobby for those who feel the later day equals to a total reshuffle. So that's the interpretation of the word later day. But also this later day can be a day for dragging feet in implementing the revitalized peace agreement by not moving further. But the challenge is that you can't have 1 week without a minister of defense while you have border crisis, you have a peacekeeping mission. You can't have 1 week without a minister of interior while you have a lot of criminals and you see drugs traffickers have been arrested, drug dealers have been arrested. So you need to have those two ministers, because in the Council of Ministers, the deputy ministers cannot continue to represent the ministry unit. So it means the later day is really the interpretation is going to be a total reshuffle, because look at this sensitive ministry: absence of Minister of Defense, absence of Minister of Interior, absence of Minister of Foreign Affairs. It means we must expect either tomorrow or Sunday if rejoice go to surface in the SSBC. Of course, for politicians from today onwards until Monday, until they resolve the problem, SSBC is the best channel compared to all international channels that we may watch, because the news hour of SSBC is more important than the BBC, CNN, and Al Jazeera. Simply why? Opportunists want to see themselves coming out and don't kick out others. That's the interpretation of the later day that I've my interpretation, that what I see. And today in Juba, when I'm watching, you can see the movement of the vehicles of lobbyists. Lobbyists are really moving around. Like, some people are smiling, some are worried. You can see there's a serious lobby going on in Juba in terms of campaigning for reshuffles. That is it. As you said, in layman language, or in layperson, if I'm to be gender sensitive, in layperson language, they have not reached an agreement. So they have met for over 2 hours. They have not reached an agreement. What they have reached is that they have reached consensus that a mistake is committed, and this mistake requires a solution. There's a consensus that I've reached on that, which for me is good in terms of acknowledging mistake and agreeing that they should add the mistake. That will diffuse a lot of miscommunication, misinformation, hate speech, hostile propaganda can reduce, and people in uniform may likely not be panicking. Of course, citizens will be panicking. When will the later day find an answer? That's where the total stability comes in. That later day may be a trigger to violence. So in layperson's language is that there was no solution found, except there's a consensus that there's a mistake and you must resolve this mistake. That's one thing that they have agreed upon. But how long will it take them to find a solution to that to that problem? Or when will they resolve that problem? The nature of the ministries that are vacant now will force them to resolve it quickly, because you have defense Interior, and Foreign Affairs. You can't have these ministries without ministers. So they being vacant as a very sensitive central ministries in the business of the government. I don't think we can finish next week without a solution on the particular mistake that has happened. That's one. And of course, also, the mistake that I've acknowledged, it opened a window for negotiations. You see, it may give one party an opportunity to negotiate regaining strength. That's one principle that is going to be. And of course, some parties will remain, of course, negotiation doesn't go until you become rigid. You remain rigid in order to win compromises. It's become a give and take. So it means this time they're giving themselves later day is a time given to brokers, so that brokers can run in between them, negotiating between the principals. So it's another time like the principal given their teams to run in the ground to seek for options. So then if they're coming for the next meeting, they're coming to find a solution. So it means the later day from tomorrow on, there will be teams that represent the two parties in dispute to find an amicable solution. And that means what? That means part of the negotiation by the teams is actually including swapping some ministers within both sides, within the SPLM and within the SPLM-IO. There may be rotational and swapping. And specifically in the sense, if SPLM-IO compromise that, yes, the Minister of Defense, they're giving in and they're taking interior, that means a lot in IO. It means a shift of power. You can't keep an Honorable Angelina out. So you have to do certain chess game, you know. You have to move some black and white somewhere and knock out some. But who is going to be? It's based on the lobby that I've said that they're going to go for it. But also in IG, if IG is having the Minister of Defense, if IO give them the Minister of Defense, and plus the Minister of Foreign Affairs that are empty, those two vacant positions of defense with our generals that you know, you can name them, how many there's so many generals. Each of them want to become to that seat of the ministry in the name of IG. That means the deputy minister should be also subject for internal arrangement where if the government takes Minister of Defense minister position, IO may take the deputy, because one party agreement does not allow one party to run a ministry which have minister and deputy minister. So that's the same thing in Interior. If IO take Minister of Interior, IG have to take the deputy Minister of Interior. So those particular businesses have to be running within the concept of later day. So for me, that's what's going to happen. And of course, in each party, having these vacancies is creating internal party crisis in terms of those who want to go and milk the cow, and those who want to deny others not to continue milking the cow until they join milking the cow. So for me, that is the environment that we are in now. And of course, also this later day is a window of corruption. Some people are going to run away with public money because they may not predict themselves. And I wish that this, from today onward, there's no any money hanging in any of the chests of the ministries, because otherwise some people are going to accumulate this money and keep, because until they get confirmed of the total reshuffle. So for me, my prediction is that the later day is waiting for finding a comprehensive reshuffle of the government from all sides, is specifically SPLM and then SPLM-IO. So it depends on, you know, the smile face that you see in the picture is a political one. That might have consequences. Such smile will not go for free. It must have consequences. And I think the consequence we may see in the next 2 week time, whether we can continue seeing same phases or some phases have to be lost in that particular environment that we have seen now there in a meeting and the total confusion that they're in now. So it's going to be a bit challenging. It becomes the question of interpretation. And for me, the faith of the solution is determined so much on the compromise between president and first vice president. The two are the determiners of the word amicable solution. Because the way how their party operates, the principal is an overall decision maker. Now, for the principal to be an overall decision maker, each of the principal is going to get a pressure from lobby group. Shilu filan, ujibu filan, tala filan, ujibu filan. So that language is going to be on the ears of the two principals from today onwards until when they're able to answer the word of later day meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Edmund Yakani, for that eloquent explanation on a simple terms on what the outcome of the two principals meeting was. We have two questions which we really need your wisdom and your experience and your knowledge on that. Number one, Edmund, in the picture there of which I need to appreciate President Isaac Tiang for displaying those pictures for our viewers to see them exactly. Those pictures can details everything on what transpired in the meeting and what happened. Such big fish cannot meet for good 2 hours and came out with a PR, which many political scientists always refer to. But when you look at the pictures, Edmund Yakani, many citizens were expecting to see other 5 vice presidents, the 4 rather. They were expecting to see Mama Rebecca Nyandeng. They were expecting to see Osena Zalbagi Kolai. They were expecting to see Taban Dengai. They were expecting to see Professor Dr. James Wani Iga. Where were these 2 vital personnel in our country? And these 4 of them, plus Dr. Riek and His Excellency President Kiir, constitutes what many citizens consider to be presidency. And if there is anything to do with the presidency, many citizens believe 6 of them should be in the room to discuss. And we believe if 6 heads come together, they can yield fruitful decisions or meaningful results that can propel the country to the greater height. Why were they not in the meeting? Edmund Yakani, the chance is yours.
You know, to share with you, my brother, I want to bring the answer right from my experience during the negotiation of the revitalized peace agreement. This image tells you a clear attitude during the negotiation of the revitalized peace agreement that when we are in Entebbe and this idea of presidency was established with the membership of 5 with the membership of president, first vice president, and then vice presidents. There was a language which was very clear. This language started from Entebbe, it went to Addis, from Addis it migrated to Khartoum, from Khartoum back to Addis. The language always, when you have a discontented issue on the table during negotiation among the parties all, normally there's a language that when the 2 elephants agree, the others cannot have any say. The 2 elephants have agreed. And the 2 elephants in the room they're describing, it is the SPLM connected with the SPLA by then, before we could name it SSPDF, and then SPLM-IO with the SPLA-IO. So it means we the 2 giant fighting force. When we agree, the rest you must go with us. And that has been built as a culture that right from that time, it continues coming up. So like, I'm sorry to use this word. It sounds like the vice presidents are head of clusters. They look like senior ministers in the name of clusters. Like their fitness into the presidency, it's not compulsory. It's more of a favor. So it seems actually the players is the president and first vice president. The others are just, we're favoring you not to leave you out. So they don't have that sense of that they are compulsory members of the presidency. This is one. And if you see this particular culture was reflected even in the text of the agreement. The only 2 people in the text of the agreement that were named is the president and first vice president. Their names are written in the agreement. You can run away with the rest, but you can't run away with them. For you to change their names, you need to trigger Article 8.4 as an amendment. Today, you can write another name in the name of the president, another name in the name of the first vice president. Unless you trigger Article 8.4, that becomes changing their names is an amendment to the agreement by itself. But the rest, you can play around with them. So they're not central. So my answer is that there's a sense that whenever SPLM-IO and SPLM disagree, it is the 2 elephants that disagree, and it's affairs of the 2 elephants to meet. And you can see the picture is very clear. Because it's supposed to be a presidency issue, because at the end of the day, whatever they're doing is in line of the agreement, and it have a consequences on the whole agreement implementation spirit. So it means if the rest are part and parcel of the agreement, indirectly, the implications will have on them. Okay, for example, if the two disagree, and in their disagreement means the collapse of the agreement, and the other vice president collapse together with them. But if they're supposed to be in the room, they could have contributed not to make the agreement collapse. So they are on the mercy of the two principles that has happened. And of course, this become a culture that it's been a technical violation of the agreement, and it's been entertained from time to time, like nobody talks about it. And even I'll tell you, mechanisms, regional mechanisms like IGAD, like other mechanisms, when the two meet, for them, they feel consensus has been reached. Whether it's consensus under the presidency or consensus under semi-presidency meeting, Al-Muhim, consensus was reached by the presidency. So that meeting, if you see, you wait for the resolutions. The resolutions will refer to the mechanism of presidency. We'll never refer to the mechanism that the president and the first vice president met. Though in the statement, we have seen that statement coming out. So that is the challenge in terms of political attitudes in respecting the spirit and the text of the agreement. So, and that is going to disturb us throughout the process of implementing the agreement. And it's been disturbing us right from day one when the government was established of national unity on 22nd February. It's continuous until now. So the language, it's now practically been exercised. When the two elephants have affairs, the others, please, you keep on watching, but they don't know the consequences of the meeting of the two elephants may also victimize them. So that's my answer to your question.
Thank you so much, Edmund, for actually driving your answers all the way from the agreements. And unfortunately, many citizens believe that the presidency constituted of 6 people can make rightful decision. Secondly, in African culture, when 2 people quarrels, they always need a third party. And we, other citizens, believe that if there is any misunderstanding between the 2 principles, the IO and the SPLM, and then the other 4 vice presidents should be mediators at the capacity in the presidency. Unfortunately, there could be a reason to why they were isolated during the meeting. The second question, Edmund Yakani. Now the meeting was supposed to take place this week on Monday. And then it was pushed to Thursday. And then from Thursday to Friday today. And again, there were no clear consensus reached by the 2 leaders. And citizens were given what many scientists call PR to the later date. Considering all this, Edmund Yakani, and the roadmap, which was actually the presidency, was a brainchild of that roadmap, and citizens own it as South Sudanese, no another interference from international communities. Roadmap details that by the end of next year, December 2024, we should be having election. And 2025, February on 22nd, then the whole agreement will cease to exist in the face or in the territory of South Sudan. Since we are having petty grievances and disputes, and we are spending time on this, what will be the impact of these simple delayments of few differences on the roadmap holistically? Considering also the Constitutional Amendment Commission, they are also in crisis, and Lagos State media is aware of that. We received document from them last week, or this week rather, resigning from their duties or postponing their duties simply because of payments and facilitation to work on the Constitution of South Sudan. Looking at the Electoral Commission of South Sudan need to be constituted. Looking at South Sudan National Bureau of Statistics, that also need to be financed and equipped with the necessary skills and equipment to carry out the census, to know the population of our country and who is eligible to vote and who is not supposed to vote by next year general election. And figuring some few things here and there. And also we have fallout groups, which the 2 principals and the government actually told the Pope that they will send their delegation to Rome to resume the peace talk in Rome. Now we are focusing much on the very few mistakes within the presidency, and we have been keeping postponing them every now and then. What is the impact of all these small things and postponements on daily basis to the whole agreements of roadmap? Thank you, Edmund Yakani.
Thank you. I want to petition my response to your question into segments. Segment number one, I want to respond to what is the requirement that we need supposed to be engaging on now so that we meet the deadline of December 2024 as a deadline of credible. We may not use the word fair. Maybe we say credible, of course, credible, fair, but maybe the word free is a bit challenging, and peaceful elections. One, elections all over the world have a calendar. And if you look at the electoral calendar, it have around 4 or 5 milestones in the cycle of electoral processes. One, legal framework. That's the first thing. After legal framework, the institutional setup in terms of the capability of the institution that is required to deliver the type of the elections that you want to go for. So if you have the legal framework, you have the institutional setup, that means that is the stage one you have done. Stage two now is staffing of the institution, because you need to staff the institution, you need to equip the institution. That's very important. And that is inclusive of designing the type of the civic education and voter education towards the system of the election enshrined in the electoral law. That's very important. You need to handle that as stage two. Now stage three, you need to start rolling out what do you call you need to roll out voter education to be rolling out so that people can start preparing themselves for the elections. And that is in two ways. One way is citizens who are voters, you need to work with them. And the second way is those who will be contesting, that means the political parties angle, you need to work with them. That's the second, that's the fourth stage. Now, also you need to answer critical questions in the context of South Sudan. Do you go for elections with the census or without census? That's the second critical question to ask in the electoral process in the context where we are. Two, with the pockets of violence we have in our country, how do you zero constituency? How do you draw constituencies? And remember the electoral law, which is on its way to the parliament from the Ministry of Justice, that I've seen is mentioning 125 constituency. How do you build up that 125 constituencies that the parliament need to endorse? And how does those design of constituency respond to possible electoral related disputes over territorial boundaries in designing a constituency? Need to be answered. So by now we could have done with what we call the infrastructure for elections. And if you look at the speech of the president for the close of the year, with reference to the provision of the agreement, is that constitutional making process is a prerequisite or a precondition for the conduct of elections. Of course, the question around census, the experts in country are saying there are situations where you can conduct election even without census, because census is not necessarily meant for elections. Census can be used for budgeting and planning, but you need to have a proper formula on how to design constituencies that embrace the principle of inclusivity and embrace the principle that minority should also be represented. So you need to discuss methodology if you're not using census in designing the seats to the parliament. And of course, our parliament is be reduced from 500 to 50% to 225, which is half of the current size of the parliament. Now, how do you bring everybody to the principle of inclusivity and minority involvement through constituency demarcation that everybody comes in? So if you see these critical questions right now, have not found completely an answer, and we are very far from providing them answers. That's one thing that we need to put forward. Now, there are other attachments that have linked with this question of the elections. What are these attachments? Number one, political parties. You cannot, elections is not a process of imam and bishops and teachers and doctors. No, elections is a political process, and the place of elections are the political parties. So you need to start empowering political parties to start gaining trust and confidence on the electoral processes by the system of the elections that you have designed. Because one thing that people normally have, that when you talk of electoral-related disputes, many people believe that electoral-related disputes, it start on the date of the voting or date of counting votes. No. Electoral-related disputes started right from day one within the parties, right from the primary of the parties. Even in making a statement, remember, 2013 crisis was a result where we were supposed to heading elections. Right from the time of how internal parties members are expressing themselves to contest for electable position, it will become a natural disaster. And we've seen with 2013 within the SPLM, when some people said expressing, I'm going to contest. And remember, there's no electoral law, no electoral commission, or nothing, but just somebody say, I'm going to express my opinion, so I want to contest for this seat. We have faced the consequences right now. We're in crisis in 2013. So electoral dispute normally started within the parties. So to what level are the political parties matured? How much have they been empowered? How much have they been educated on the electoral system? How much have they built trust and confidence? Because they need to have the tendency, or they need to have this, the political attitudes that the whole process of the elections and the way how the results are going to be declared and the way we're going to contest, I trust. Whatever the results are, I have no problem with it. You need to gain that trust and confidence. And that requires what? That means requires political parties need to be registered early. They need to be educated early enough. They need to be equipped early enough. And political parties internally need to manage their primaries, which should not trigger violence. And remember, it was SPLM primaries that triggered violence with David Yao, with George Kongor in George Ator, George in PG. You have Peter Sole. You have
George Ator, yeah.
George Ator. You have late Peter Gadet in Unity State around Mayom. People have to rebel, and dispute of electoral beginning stage has created greater people administrative area. Greater people administrative area is a clear indicator of a dispute of elections right from day one, before the counting of the results. Counting of the results is legitimizing the dispute, because candidate of David Yaya to continue in the process was not trusted. And that's why when the results, just to say, so he undergone those process to qualify a reason of why I need to rebel. So and George Ator have done that, as I said, so many have done that. Okay, so political parties, where are we? The act is passed, and this act is even not been printed by means of justice, so that is even not gazetted, so that people who have aspirations for political parties start reading it and start preparing themselves. Political parties council is not constituted, so that you register political parties, and political parties are building alliances, because some of them cannot contest. Some of them are flash and briefcase parties. It's still somebody say, I'm the chairperson, but where are the members and how much is the members? And because that particular space of the political parties establishment is not in place, that's a challenge to the December 2024 deadline in terms of sequencing activities going there. Number three, the political space. Yes, the presidency have agreed to lift the powers of national security from arresting without warrant of arrest. But that does not mean that they are not having responsibility on approval. They still have power of approval. So approving political space for you to go out there and say, I want to speak. What is being removed is that they should not arrest anybody without a warrant of arrest. But they were not being told you cannot sanction someone who want to express or want to go to a space. They still have that power. So that you need to agree upon. And that have related to things to do with code of conduct of the elections. And that requires some institution like Electoral Commission to be in place in order to check which particular party is abusing state capacity or capability in terms of institutions, in undermining other political parties, in gaining momentum. So if you see the infrastructure in terms of legal framework and institutions, in terms of the law for political parties, which is already passed, the law for the constitution is a precondition, which is already passed, the reconstitution of institutions that have linked with the electoral process, which are mainly the National Electoral Commission, the Constitutional Review Commission, the Constitutional Drafting Committee, to pass the constitutional process as a prerequisite for elections. And then if you are going with the Census Bureau, if you want to use census for demarcating constituency, if you're not using census for demarcating constituency, you need to have a clear framework on how you are going to demarcate constituency in terms of absence of census, if you don't go. Then remember, you have some side questions with elections. The fate of refugees and IDPs in voting for elections. Are you going to establish constituency? How are you going to establish those constituency? And then remember, the POC, Is the POC a constituency of Juba, or the POC the constituency of the states where this people come? So all those questions, you need to answer them so that we meet a deadline of December. We are very far from answering these questions. Then, in terms of, like, if you look at recent Kenyan elections experience, there's other institutions that play a big role in gaining non-violent elections. Which are these institutions? Judiciary have to be ready to provide legal experts to respond to electoral-related disputes. Police have to be ready to work with the citizen when citizens feel their life is under attack, or any candidate feel their life is under attack. Otherwise, we'll go to a Ugandan way, where you are given a police that is supposed to protect you, and his colleague, who is a policeman, have to attack you. Remember one of the candidates of Uganda who have removed his shoes. His police was beaten by his counter police. He's protecting his candidate by the mandate that he was tasked to protect this candidate, but his colleagues who are police command have to disarm him and beat him up. That's why do you go with the opposition? But he is a police of the same ministry, deployed by the ministry that go and protect this. But he became a weaker than his counterparts that protect the incumbent system. So all those experiences, you need to put them to an order to meet the deadline of December. Now, let's come to other environmental issues, climate issues related to elections. Because of infrastructure is not okay. From May, mobility is going to be problematic. And still, we are going to experience floods. And remember, some states have been flooded. How are we going to do like unity? How are we going to draw constituency unity and where population have been flooded? So all those technical questions require an answer. So I will say, with this political attitude of we create extra challenges to implement the agreement, like the decrees that we have to postpone meetings, is actually contributing in reducing commitment and reducing a speed to meet the deadline of December 2024. Of course, let me tell you, I've been reading more than 4 surveys. Citizens have made a clear conclusion. No more extension, and there's no excuse for elections. We need it. You cannot anymore extend, and you cannot anymore avoid elections. Now, political practices and political attitudes are not responding to those questions. Postponing meeting from one day to another day to later day, even the deployment of the unified forces is being postponed now for almost, we're going for 1 year since the day they graduated. We're hitting now half a year. They're not redeployed, and the other forces are not enrolled. So the political attitudes we have among the politicians who are implementing the agreement and around the principles are not pro-elections, but they have no option, because, to be honest, there's a question of legitimacy if they fail to meet the deadline of December. And there's no chance for them again to avoid the agreement by triggering that they want to extend. There's no any more extension. The only option they have is, when come December 2024, declare a state of emergency, and the state of emergency, elections cannot be conducted under the state of emergency, we extend our presence, unless they have to impose that one. But will that one gain legitimacy? Obviously no. Or if they want to use their own peace process, and remember, they're supposed to resume on the 18th of this month, their own peace process. They have to go back to Rome on this. And then if they come, unless they use their own peace process, there's another agreement. But that is still, it has challenge with, in terms of legal framework, under the revitalized peace agreement and the roadmap. So the politicians have double work. They don't have double work. And of course, the whole, let me tell you, if you have a political attitude change, and one of the indicators of that political attitude change is that if they can avail political will and political commitment, they can make a miracle in 6 months period. What is required is allow each institution to run its business simultaneously, give the money required simultaneously, because the indicator is very clear. Our Ministry of Roads and Bridges is unable to build roads across the country. But because POP is coming in 1 week, we see the tarmac. So that's a clear indicator that once there's a money, miracles can happen. So if you want to meet the deadline of December, give the relevant institutions their money and task them simultaneously to run. We will meet the deadline of December 2024 if there's a political will and political commitment, where we have a change of political attitudes and we demonstrate political maturity to pave the way to meet the deadline of December. And the only way, as I said, citizens are fed up of transitioning and extension, because transition was not sensitive. When they start using transition as a tool of extending their mandate, becomes sensitive. Now extension becomes sensitive. Even this word roadmap now, you know, if you go to meetings and say, let's develop roadmap, they say, which roadmap? The one of the revitalized agreement or another roadmap. So even the word roadmap become political sensitive, which is a very innocent word that would have used. But now you have politicized it to the level that become, and South Sudan become actually a country that you start politicizing every terminology. So I don't know from the roadmap what next. Revitalize, we have politicized it so much. Something that you are supposed to revitalize it. So you can revitalize your life, because the moment say, if I want to revitalize my life, say, is it in the same way how the agreement has been revitalized? So we're making every word to become political sensitive. Thank you, my brother. Over there to you.
Thank you so much, Brother Edmund Yakani, for your explanations and how you dissect these questions in different aspects. Up to this juncture, I will yield it back to my co-host, the one that is controlling the show, President of Lagos State Media, Isaac Tier, Paul, to give us, if there are some questions at the comment section. Yeah, we have questions from Martin. What is that mistake, and who has mistaken who? Yeah, the question is in line with the two principles coming out without concrete results, but they came out that we acknowledge there is mistakes, and we have given ourselves time to rectify such mistakes. So my brother Martin is asking, who has wrong who, or who has mistaken who among the two principles? Thank you very much.
Yes, my answer to Brother Martin is that what is the mistake? Before I could answer the second part, who have mistaken who? The mistake was a presidential decree was issued for swapping ministries. Ministry of Defense was swapped from being controlled by IO, swapped to be controlled by SPLM IG. And Interior was swapped from being controlled by IG to be controlled by IO. I normally like to tell people is that the relief of the two ministers is a secondary purpose. The actual primary purpose of the decree was the swapping of the ministry. But you cannot swap ministries and you don't relieve ministers. So the ministers are consequences of swapping of the ministry. So now, when you look at the spirit of the agreement, how do you do swapping? Because I was arguing with somebody, also a professor, by the way. I don't know, sometimes this level of education we have problem with interpretation. One professor was saying, let's treat the two interpretation differently. The relief of ministers and the swapping of the ministers. I say you can't treat them differently. The swapping is a primary objective of the decree, but you cannot swap Ministry of Defense from IO and you're swapping it to SPLM, and automatically you say, Angelina, you go as a minister from defense here, you're observed automatically, secretly, without being declared, you're the Minister of Interior, and Interior, secretly, you're defense. This cannot happen. So the primary objective is swapping of the ministry, and in line of swapping of the ministry, the consequence is that you have to relieve the ministers. That's why the ministers were relieved, simply because the objective is swapping. So that is a mistake. The mistake is that the swapping of the Ministry of Defense and Interior between IO and SPLM IG was not in line with the spirit of the agreement. What is the spirit of the agreement? The spirit of the agreement is that the two parties are supposed to go for consultation. Once they consult, then they reach consensus. If they reach consensus through consultation, finish. That one is in line with the spirit of the agreement, which has happened in the way how Jongole was swapped between IO being the first owners of Jongole State and then given to SOA, which is through consultation. And nobody have declared as a mistake. Nobody have declared as a violation. Why? Because they have applied the principle of consultation and consensus. Then they come out. So that is the mistake. Who commit this mistake? Is a presidential decree issued by president against the swapping or about the swapping of the ministries. It means the leadership of the president, which is the principle of the incumbent party, have violated the agreement by swapping the ministries from IG, from IO to IG and IG to IO, not in line of the agreement. That's the mistake, and that is what the mistake has happened. And that's why the two principles, president and first vice president, have to meet to resolve the mistake which was committed through the presidential decree. But of course, my feeling is that sometimes the president and first vice president become victims of those people whom we may call them spoilers, the brokers of the power. They matter down who push this swapping to happen. But at the end of the day, the principal have to swallow the bitter pill. So that is the mistake, Martin, and that's who commit mistake against you. The mistake is swapping of the ministries between defense and interior, between IO and IG is not in line with spirit agreement, and president's decree was not in line. Is a unilateral, as IO described in their statement. So the best way is that they have to go back to dialogue. That's why if you see the statement of RGMEC and the statement of IGAD, is that let them dialogue, because dialogue, it is a basic principle of building consensus and reaching a consent in line of implement the revitalized peace agreement. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you so much, Edmund Yakani, for answering our viewer, which is Martin. I think up to this juncture, if there are no more questions on the comment sections and also on Clubhouse, then I will request my brother Isaac Tiangpol to come up so that we can wrap up our show with a word of appreciation, and then we'll give you chance, Mr. Edmund Yakani, to give us your closing remark and your message to South Sudanese. And remember, citizens are now also anticipating for that later day on what will happen. So it will be like another second meeting. So you really need your message on that. President Isaac, all right, there is a question here. Is there anything articled in the agreement, descriptions, the positions, if he or she being relieved?
Okay, maybe my answer to this question, in the agreement in chapter 1, there's an article on distribution of ministries among the parties that are signatory to the revitalized peace agreement. So before formation of the government of national unity, the parties were given an opportunity to distribute the 35 ministries. And they distributed 35 ministries in a system of pooling the ministries in rotational way. So if you remember, the parties have to negotiate which party. There are 5 parties. You have SPLM, which is IG, which composed of other parties. Then you have SPLM-IO, you have SOA, you have OPP, then you have FDs. These are 5 signatories to the revitalized agreement. So each of them are given number of ministries out of the 35. Then they have to pull in rotational way. If IG pull 1, IO will pull 1, SOA will pull 1, FDs will pull 1. That means in that process of pulling the ministries, the formation of the government describe the representation and the participation of any party legitimately in the government by the way how they pull the ministries. So the day one they have pulled distribute the ministries, and they reach consensus that these ministries belong to this party, this ministry belong to this party. And remember, agreement I've said also, one party cannot appoint the minister and deputy, and then they have to distribute the deputies. From that day, no any either of the party have any constitutional prerogative or have constitutional power to relieve any either of the party member among them after they have allocated the ministries. These things has happened long time ago in 2019. That's the first thing, the arrangement. Now, if you want to apply the principle of swap, how do you apply it? And I will repeat this to my colleague. When we're distributing the states, there was a dispute between Jongole being given to IO and then Melekal being given to IG. IO protests, they need Melekal. They are not going to take Jongole. And citizens of Jongole protest, they don't want to see IO in Jongole. They have not liberated Jongole as IO. They don't want. Then what was brought? An idea of swapping was brought after they have distributed the states. Now, the idea of the swapping is that you need to relieve Jongole from the hands of IO control, you need to give it to SOA. Then you need to relieve Melekal from the control of the IG to IO. So then they went for consultation. And the consultation was under the presidency. This goes back to the question asked, when President and Vice President were meeting, where are the others? But that consultation was done under the presidency with the other presidents that even have nothing to do with the swapping of the state of Jongole. So later on, then they reached consensus at the presidency that no, now let SOA take Jongole and then let IO take Melekal. So that is the process. So the question is asking whether there's a particular article. There's no particular article. What normally address the question of a relief of a minister and a swapping is a spirit of agreement. Let me apply the word relief of a minister for a particular party, like the relief of Angelina Ezayo from the defense. How does the agreement address that? Since parties have allocated themselves ministries, president only issue a decree. On what basis? President issue a decree if the parties have their internal consultations and they reach consensus that their ministers will be relieved, and they brought names of 3 people for president to appoint through a decree 1. Have that been applied somewhere? Yes. Look at the way how Peter Mayen was relieved from the Minister of Humanitarian. OPP were given an indication. OPP came and say, we as OPP want to replace our minister, but OPP have to go and do internal consultations and come with a nominee. So OPP as a parties, they pull a candidate. Now they give the candidate to the president. Relieve for us Peter Mayen and replace him with this. So it's an internal consensus of OPP. So if you see this decree, have this decree followed the spirit of the agreement? No. And that is where we consider as an agreement as a violation. So there's no particular article that explains relief and swapping. The relief and swapping is within the spirit of the agreement, which is based on consultation, consensus, and you build up a consent, president execute. That is the way how the agreement spirit operates in terms of cordial government. Because listen, let me just give an answer to the audience. If we don't respect the spirit of the agreement in terms of consultation and consensus, actually it undermines the principle of what you call government of national unity or coalition government. Coalition government is based on the principle of consultation. Remember in Kenya in 2007, when there were crises, when Raila Odinga and Kibaki were in power, even if they take tea and they walk out the tea room and they call media, they say, we're in consultation, everybody believes, because it was a coalition government. So even if they're taking tea, they come out, they say, we have been in serious coalition dialogue and we reach consensus. Even they're taking tea, they will address people, we're in coalition, why are you there, you're not there. So the meeting of President Salva and Riek, which was held today, was within the spirit of consultation. So now today they consult themselves, they've reached anything, they came and they give us the outcome of the consultation in PR that we are in reconciliation, we're in a friendly mood, we had good results. What is it? It's none of your business. We are in consultation and our consultation continue until later day. So we are waiting for the outcome of that later day. What is the result of that? So for me, that's what we need to understand. And we shouldn't argue over this. This is something in agreement, very clear and straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you, Edmund Yakani. Yeah, Ben Isaac, do we have more questions? And if not,
no, we don't have more questions. We can just come to wrap up for the closing.
Thank you. Edmund Yakani, the chance is yours. 2 minutes to give us your closing remark before we end our show. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. One thing that I would like to make it very clear always in such political dispute, I'm urging South Sudanese, wherever you are, whatever job you're doing, don't take this political dispute as an opportunity of declaring your own war. Because we have been watching social media, more than 35 people have already declared war before the commanders-in-chief of the actual parties declared their war. So why do you want to have a hostile propaganda in social media? What do you benefit from this hostile propaganda? So this is my first conclusion, that stop declaring war in social media. Even some have reached to the level that commanders of this particular base or this particular garrison were instructed to launch an attack over this. Who gave you that mandate that you start declaring? So people are now, see, I don't know what the South Sudanese who love war, they start declaring war. So please, these generals, brigadiers, militias of social media, don't declare the wars for us like that. Because it affects citizens. And some citizens have no access to information. When they see those wars that we declare in social media, it makes people panic. You may contribute in creating a panic among the citizens. Because I will share with you, this is my phone. I have a tracking system. Right now, I have collected 35 in my monitoring system, 35 messages of people who are saying, IU have already instructed their forces in Akobo, in Nirol, where for this base to be attacked. Some are saying already SSPDF have instructed their forces in point A, point B to attack. There was one of the commanders of IU who left WOW. He's called Abraham Gum. He left WOW, he came to Juba. that Abraham is already arrested as IO commander. He is brought to Juba because that's so that the force will be taken out. Imagine these messages. Any military movement, we need to qualify this. So I would like to say hostile propaganda, hate speech will never help us. Political disputes are always there. And specifically, my brothers who are in diaspora, I do not, when Trump brought the militias to White House in order to keep him as a president, what happened with the Americans? They resolved their dispute, they pick up new life. So our president can disagree like Trump is disagreeing with Biden. Trump say, Biden, I cannot go, my militias must come and put me into White House, or I'll show you who I am. And then they resolve it. Why is ours, we want to generalize it to become a complete citizens' affairs? This one. Two, I have seen South Sudanese who have gone to school, but they believe on tribe and ethnicity dominance as like they believing in holy prayer of the Christianity. You just say amen, you don't know the meaning of the prayer. These tribes were not given to us by God to cause us to kill ourselves and to cause us hate each other. These tribes were given to us as a blessing. We can use it. It's actually an economical value. It's an economical value. So can we use social media to portray South Sudan in the manner when our basketball team were portraying us out there? Nobody knows who is among those players. It's a national team. Their reception, nobody knows which tribes come forward. It's a national team. So why should we not use social media to promote peace and stability? So my appeal again, before I close, use social media to promote peace and stability, and use social media to build national heritage and national identity among our different tribes and among our different communities, among our different religion, among our different regions. Otherwise, let God bless South Sudan. Don't contribute in fueling violence among our people, whether you want to contribute panic that may result, that or may lead to the violence. So otherwise, let God bless South Sudan. Later day, let's not keep quiet. Let's demand later day be tomorrow, not later day to be until next month. This later day is disturbing, but let us keep on demanding our principles to respond to later day next week, not later day next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Edmund Yakani, for your message. First of all, to our viewers, we thank you so much on behalf of Lagos State Media for tuning in and taking your time to come and listen to our guest. And as I always said, it is our responsibility as media outlets, especially online media outlets, to bring rightful information to you, and analysis will be upon you on which one to do with that information. And the reason is, or us doing this is simple. There are too many propagandists that are running around, and they're taking advantage of social media to actually cause more problems to our country and specifically to our government. So it is our mandate always to invite guests to come and speak to South Sudanese and give you accurate information. To Lagos State Media team, thank you so much, President Isaac Tieng, for staying up to these morning hours in Australia. Sacrifice your sleep simple because of our nation affairs. And to the Deputy President Isaac Bolmaku, rather, thank you so much for doing your work. I'm pretty aware that you are just there behind the scene trying to set everything in order. Abraham Adin Majak, you're always there also sacrificing your sleep for the sake of our nation affairs. Gardeng Mabok, I know you are down there and you are our man of the day like Makwelwe in South Sudan government. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your teamwork, and your teamwork always give us energy to continue providing adequate information to our followers. To our followers, subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on Facebook so that you will not be left out in case of any interview or any conversation with any of the guests that we might invite in the near future. Lastly, we will be following the issue of later day closely with our brother Edmund Yakani for the next few weeks and see what will be the results of that later day and how it will be resolved amicably between the two principles. And on the same note, there are two outstanding things that we were supposed to hold a conversation upon. Number one is the issue of Chapter 5 in the agreement. We are here also to help our government to disseminate the agreement to the citizen. Number two is the relationship of South Sudan with Russia. We are both aware as Lagos State media that Russia has called the African Russia Summit, which African head of states will be there. So we'll also need to discuss that and see the implication of such relations in the interest of our geopolitical landscape as the country and as the region East Africa and as the continent as Africa. To this juncture, may God bless us Sudanese. May God bless you who is watching us right now. And I yield it back to my boss, Isaac Tiang Paul. Thank you so much, Edmund Yakani.
Thank you so much, Edmund Yakani, and thank you, Secretary General Major Makur, for this great interview. I'm always happy to listen to you, Yakani, for your dedication to the nation. You always bring a good news to the people. You committed yourself. You always find times to come and dispute the wrong propagandas going around in the social media being misused by the others. It's wonderful. Thank you for that. And all our viewers, our show is coming to an end. We will catch up again as Secretary General has said it, and all the teams of Lagos State Media Beyond Boundaries behind the scene. I have to say thank you all. Those who are watching also and listening from the clubhouse with Abraham Madin Majab. Thank you guys. Have a good time, good day, good afternoon, wherever you are tuning in. God bless you. God bless Republic of South Sudan. God bless all of us. Thank you. Have a good time.
We Santo Man Kolnyang Mike Cholgrangawan Yupit Luping Yarul Pandini Chet Maniel Anaketon Niel Jilo Wenetona Dol. I think a kick Gabuka Gadibo by Anyalia de Kuika Pingrin Gemana when I Jangarong, I jedu Kagaparandi Madina Maja Kugo Makur Kagabolikan Kuaita Tian Wagaridin Kegela Emmanuel when you go to York. I think a kick Gabuka Gadibo by Anyalia de Kuika Pingrin Gemana when I Jangarong, I jedu Kagaparandi Madina Maja Kugo Makur Kagabolikan Kuaita Tian Wagaridin Kegela Emmanuel when a man you go to York. I think a kick Gabuka